Welcome to the Madness and Grace podcast, where we discuss the connection between mental health and faith. I'm your host, Dr. Matthew Stanford, CEO of the Hope and Healing Center and Institute in Houston, Texas.
And I'm your co-host, Dr. Maddie Stiers, Chief Clinical Officer of the Hope and Healing Center and Institute. We're so glad you're joining us today.
Each week, we explore personal stories, expert insights, and the profound ways faith can influence our mental well-being. Whether you're seeking comfort, understanding, or simply a new perspective, we're here to journey with you. Thank you for tuning in. Now let's get started with today's episode. Hello, and welcome to another episode of Madness and Grace. This is Matt Stanford, and Maddie Stiers is with me as always. How are you today, Maddie?
I'm good. Glad to be here.
Yeah, good to have you. And we have a friend today, a friend as a guest, and we're very excited to have him because this is a topic that I am asked about literally all of the time. And as I was just telling our guest, I really don't know much about it, to tell you the truth. And I do give an answer that he gave me a long time ago, which we'll talk about later, that most people aren't real happy with. So let me go ahead and introduce our guest, and we're going to get into a discussion today of the gut-brain connection. So Dr. Alok Madan is a clinical health psychologist with more than 20-year history of developing clinical research and educational programs to improve the quality of care for individuals with chronic medical conditions and serious mental illness. Presently, he serves as vice chair of the Department of Psychiatry and Behavioral Health and the John S. Dunn Foundation Distinguished Centennial Chair in Behavioral Health at Houston Methodist Hospital. His research interests include examination of the gut-based contributions to psychiatric illness and development of novel brain stimulation technologies. He holds full professorships at Houston Methodist Academic Institute, the Cornell Medical College, Baylor College of Medicine, Texas A&M University, and the University of Texas Health Science Center at Houston. He earned his doctorate in clinical psychology and Master of Public Health degrees from the University of Alabama at Birmingham. And we're so excited to have you with us today, Alok.
Well, thank you for having me, Matt and Maddie. It's
You
good
don't
to be
really,
here.
honestly don't, I know it's a very hot area, but I really don't run into a lot of mental health researchers, psychiatric researchers that actually study the gut-brain connection. You hear about it all the time. Do you, I mean, obviously it's a growing field, but how large would you say the field really is?
I think you're right. It has grown. I got into this probably about 10 years ago. And when I started out, our team was probably among a handful of people globally who were really looking at the brain-gut interface in real psychiatric patients, right? So it's the bulk of the research is based on really animal studies and maybe some healthy controls. There are not many of us that are really looking at kind of brain-gut interface in psychiatric illness with real patients. With that being said, it's, as is any kind of gut microbiome research, it's really kind of North America and Western Europe with few pockets in China. So, I mean, I say kind of where the research is happening is that whatever we know about anything gut microbiome related, and in particular with psychiatric illness, it's a very biased sample. This is a Western population and doesn't account for 70% of the globe, where, diet varies a lot, and that can have huge bearing on your gut. The topography, the geography, the climate has the pollutants, they have huge bearing. So any discussion that we have, it's not about the human condition. It's a small select sample of the human condition. And even then, it's, our research is mostly on animal studies. So none of us really know a whole lot.
That's pretty interesting. Well, could you just kind of explain kind of what your perspective is, or kind of what is this gut-brain connection? And then, given the things you just said, why do you think it's really gained so much attention in the recent years? And I think that would probably be in two areas. Certainly there's research, from the research perspective, but it's so much more popular and discussed in the kind of popular culture, I think, than it is looked at. So if you kind of tell us what it is, and then why you think it's kind of grown in both of those areas.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's start with the why. All right. And then I'll give you kind of the why. We don't know kind of as the state of the science, we don't really understand psychiatric illness all that well from kind of a biological level, right? So the search for kind of a biomarker of disease and or treatment is kind of the holy grail of the field. So whether we're looking at brain scans, we're looking at genetics, we're looking at blood-based markers, or the gut microbiome, this became another area where we're really looking for answers to try to solve kind of struggles and understand struggles that affect so many of us across the planet. Depression is the leading cause of disability globally. So, I mean, it's affecting all of us. And I think the why is we want answers. We're desperate for answers to understand and desperate for better treatments. So this is kind of where we are. The brain-gut interface, I think we've known about it for millennia. Really. I mean, we have across cultures, we have terms like butterflies in our stomach, what happens to our bowels when we get scared, right? It's all of us can relate to the phenomena of gurglings in our belly when we're anxious, getting up to give a speech, getting up to talk at a wedding, before a test, before a job interview. And then some of us, we get sad, we get depressed. Our guts we get constipated.
Right.
Some of us have nausea, some of us have vomiting. So this experience, I think, is very common to the human condition, and we've recognized it forever. I think it's more in the past, couple of decades that we're really getting, the technology's finally gotten there where we can get a picture of what the bacteria and the microorganisms in our gut actually look like, that we're able to take the microscope down and we're able to talk, I guess, we're able to say things a little bit more definitively. I think the science is probably a little bit too further, a little aggressive in the interpretation of what the data actually are. It's again because it gets the news. This is what we as a society want to know, so we make broad claims. I mean, I was listening, I don't know what was on the radio probably about a year or two ago. It's researchers and doctors have figured out the cause for autism. It's these 5 different bacteria in your gut. And it couldn't have been 20 seconds later that the reporter goes, recent study of 7 kids with autism compared to 7 kids without. It's like you're making those grand conclusions based on 14 people. And this is this is prime time, right? This is, and they're not alone. There are plenty of folks. So our gut bacteria, we've got in our guts. Probably it depends on when you're looking at the data, but as of about noon today, now the number is up to about 3,500 different bacterial species in our gut. And together they're anywhere from 10 to 100 trillion of them. All right. So the wide range, right? And, curiously, they weigh about 3 pounds, which is how much our brains weigh on average, too. And it's a bi-directional relationship. So kind of what's going on in the gut affects how we're thinking, what our moods, our behaviors, and kind of what we're thinking, what we're feeling, and what we're doing has bearing on our gut bacteria too. And it's not just the bacteria, right? So we're going to talk about the bacteria today, but our guts have their own nervous system. It's actually called an enteric nervous system, right? There's a big, huge vein or a nerve that goes down, the vagus nerve, from the brain directly to the gut. So there's a lot of back and forth. One of the targets for depression, one of our antidepressants out there, treats our serotonin receptors, which is related to our mood, right? We've got lots of serotonin receptors in our brain, but we actually have more in our guts than we do in our brain. So it's complicated. It's bi-directional, and the science is coming along that, take your pick of disease, XYZ disease, whether that's depression, whether that's bipolar disorder, whether that's schizophrenia, compared to people who don't have it, the bacterial signature looks different. And that's about what we can say right now, in large part because we don't even know what normal looks like. What is the normal gut microbiome? We don't know. We're not there. So, long way of saying we're looking for a whole lot of answers for conditions that are not fully understood. Treatments tend to be modestly effective. And the gut microbiome is another target, at least a biologically based target, where we may be able to find answers and maybe solutions to ails that affect all of us.
Right. Well, you mentioned a couple things there. You've kind of talked a little bit about the microbiome, but I'll move you a little bit towards the kind of some of the particular mental health issues. I mean, you mentioned the autism study there, and I've come across, autism studies. I remember a few years ago there was a fecal implant study that was done where it was supposedly, it reduced, they washed out the biomes on these kids, and then they implanted some healthy, bacteria and stuff that they had scavenged from some fecal matter, and and reduce their symptoms. Oh, now we know how to treat autism, and then you mentioned the vagus nerve, and I've seen, certainly in the past, we know that people have tried vagal stimulation for things like depression or a lot of different psychiatric illnesses. So how does this microbiome or this kind of gut-brain connection, how does that influence things like anxiety, depression, stress? Are we even at that point where we can say, this causes this or this exacerbates this? I mean, are we even at that point, or we just know there's a connection?
I think we're at the point beyond there's just a connection. I don't think we're at the point of saying it is bacteria A, B, C, and D that are causing any illness. All right. But what I do think where we are is that, generally speaking, a better functioning and more diverse gut microbiome tends to be associated with better health. Now, we're getting, and as our gut microbiome gets off balance, and really what we're saying with off balance, what I'm saying with off balance, as it becomes more homogeneous, and you have an overabundance of set of bacteria or an underabundance of set of bacteria, this kind of modulates psychiatric illness. So the way I like to think of the gut microbiome is as a volume switch, right? So I think your genetics and your environment kind of combine to kind of result in the phenotype, the experience of a psychiatric illness. And this is this is kind of accepted, right? A diathesis stress model, right? Where I think the gut microbiome comes in, it's how bad is it going to be, right? And I think that the gut microbiome, the way that it turns the volume up or down, is really through kind of inflammation and immune functioning. So it's, and I think it's not limited to psychiatric illness or neurological conditions. I think this is across health and illness. A better functioning gut microbiome turns the volume down on disease severity.
Right.
And a worse functioning gut microbiome turns the volume up on it.
So as people start to think about all of this, and they might say, okay, well, I'm struggling with depression or some sort of mental illness, but I think it's really just that my gut is off balance, and so you might hear people saying, well, you need to stop taking your SSRIs, get off all of your psychiatric medication, and just start taking these supplements. If people are hearing that as suggestions or guidance for their health, what would you say to that?
I'd question who's giving that guidance, first of all. It's the credentials. We can all have opinions about things. Especially medications. I don't recommend anyone kind of just manage their own medication. Go to your doctor and have a conversation, and then just quit with your psychotherapies or your whatever it is that you're doing. I think if you've entrusted professionals to help provide that guidance, I'd have that conversation with those professionals to see if that plan is working or not. And you know, to say that we can replace all our medications and all our therapies with these supplements, I think that's asking a lot of supplements that we don't know what's actually in them, first of all, because they're not FDA regulated. And then we're not fully sure about what influence they have on the gut microbiome. I mean, when you've got, 3,500 different species of bacteria, there's plenty of redundancy built into this, right? Into the system. That just because you have too much of one or too little of another doesn't mean that they're not producing similar things, right? There's a balance. So if you introduce a probiotic or a prebiotic, that's going to disrupt the entire system. It may be helpful and maybe not. It's just you don't know. I don't know that we're there with the science to say that, these are the bacteria. I mean, generally speaking, what we've got kind of across psychiatric illness, right? Depression, bipolar disorder, schizophrenia, a handful of bacterial species are emerging, all right? So we tend to have a few too many across disease or not enough. But here's the thing, the microscope's not far enough down. We're talking at a high level of this kind of genus of a bacterial taxa, as opposed to down to the microscope. This is the actually last final thing that's causing it. We're just not there. And then if you add some of that or reduce some of that, how does that affect the entire system? We're just not there right now. The science is not clinically actionable.
Yeah,
I don't think that's great. That's not what people want to hear. I think that's what, and I think this is one of the reasons I really wanted, I wanted to have you on the show, because not only because we know you really well and you're a good friend and a great person to talk to, but you're a researcher in this area. You do research in this area. You publish in this area. You get grants in this area. You have a head knowledge of what's going on in the area. And, when I talk to just, the moms on the street kind of a thing, and they will tell me, oh, well, you have to take this probiotic, or you have to take this prebiotic, or you have to well, I read this article the other day in a magazine that said that I need to eat more of this and less of this because my biome is off. I think in the general public, the idea is that the science is somehow so down. I mean, basically we know everything, right. and that you can go to the store and buy these things. And so I was wondering if maybe in that kind of, in that arena, could you just kind of define or explain to everyone what a probiotic, a prebiotic, a postbiotic, what those are, and then really kind of just let us know, this is where you're going to give that answer that you gave me all those years ago. We were talking about what is the best thing that the science would tell you that you could do on a daily basis to try to have a healthy biome, or kind of make your gut brain connection as good as it can be.
All right. There's a lot there. All right. Yeah. You're absolutely right. I don't give the answer that most people want to hear, because it's not an easy answer. It's complicated, it's nuanced, and that's having lived in this world for so many years, that I'm really cautious in overinterpreting the data, because so many of us are overinterpreting the data. And even if we didn't intentionally overinterpret the data, media picks it up and they run with it. So I'm really trying to temper what's out there by at least being the more conservative voice in this conversation. When we've got plenty of people with their banners and cheerleaders and really touting a science that's just not there right now. So I'm I guess maybe a bit on the more conservative side, just to balance out what's happening on the larger debate. Now, so lots of terms out there, right? Prebiotic, probiotic, postbiotic, dysbiotic, antibiotic, psychobiotics. I mean, we're all over, right? So essentially, we've got all these bacteria in our gut, right? So what a probiotic is just that bacteria. And you're going to replace it, at least in theory, or at least that's the hope. Okay. Prebiotics are the things that those bacteria feed off of. All right. So they're bacteria food. And the postbiotics are what those bacteria actually produce. They're metabolites. So you can either go with just get the bacteria from outside, put it in, or you can feed your good bacteria and maybe starve out the bad bacteria, or you can sidestep all of that, and whatever those bacteria were going to produce, you just ingest that. And so I think the challenge with my conservative approach in interpreting this is that it doesn't allow for an easy solution in a pill form to solve the problem, whether that's depression, anxiety, obesity, addiction, autism. It's not easy. But that's also that the science isn't there that any of these things are actually causing. I think they contribute. As I was saying earlier, right? I think it's a volume button or a volume knob. Now, with that being said, there are things that we can do. They're much harder to do. They take a lot more effort and they take a lot more resources to manipulate the gut and the gut microbiome, and that's our diet. Especially in more Western societies, the United States in particular, the standard American diet, SAD, by the way, the acronym, has been attributed to a lot of poor health, including poor mental health. And these are ultra processed foods, like super ultra processed foods, right? Our hot dogs, our spam from a can, right? These meats and product that look nothing like what their original part was, that we have manufactured. We get a lot of calories in, and with the calories, we also get some nutrition, but then a lot of extra stuff. The extra stuff has 4 and 5 syllables each, and there are probably 24 of those ingredients in that hot dog, right? And that's what we eat regularly. It's if we want to feed a healthy gut microbiome, we can keep it simple. I mean, it really can eat real food, eat the leaves, eat the berries, eat the apple, eat the nut, eat the grain, right? That's what we're at. And this isn't to say you have to go vegetarian. Eat the egg, right?
Sure.
Eat steak. Eat chicken. Like if we can keep it simple, I think that's going to have huge bearing on our mental health. I mean, the data are out there, right? Like a really standard American diet with ultra processed foods increases your risks of developing depression or anxiety by 50%. That's there. And you can make dietary changes, like what I just said, to move to those more real foods, right? And it's not that you don't eat anything. Like this is like my general rule is about 80% of that, and then kind of throw in the 20% of your other stuff, right? But if you can stick with a firm diet, we have research out there that just dietary changes, but pretty substantial dietary changes, can have antidepressant effects more so than any medication that we have on the market, more so than any of the 3-letter psychotherapies that we have out there. Honestly, Maddie, these effect sizes were greater than 1. I mean, this is like, they're monstrous. And this is over 6 weeks. But that requires so much work. That requires so much effort, because we do what we did because we did it before. And we did it before because this is what we grew up doing. So I've got almost 5 decades of what I've done.
Right.
And if you've eaten one way for 5 decades, it's kind of hard to pivot all of a sudden. you don't know where to start. So this is, I mean, so if we want to manipulate our gut bacteria, one of the relatively easier ways to do so, at least, how about not easier, not complicated,
Sure.
is change our diet.
And we've talked about on the podcast before how mental health, physical health, all of those are related. And this is just another testament to that, that the way we eat and what we are putting in our body impacts our body. and
Absolutely.
our brain and our mind is part of that. And yeah, I think people look for all of these really complicated, pills or supplements or solutions to fix something, when maybe there's additional things that can be done, but really just changing what we're putting in our body.
I think that can have a huge effect. So here's one that people ask me for, kind of just practical, right? So what's a number that we can keep track of, right? And this one, I think this is one of those big meta numbers, if we could keep track of, our daily fiber intake. All right. And this is without supplements, without a Metamucil or something that's just, this is like, if you track your daily fiber intake, that is going to change your diet a lot. All right. You're going to eat more beans. You're going to reduce meat. You're going to get more leafy greens. You're going to get more vegetables. And if you can hit a 30 grams per day, just that's your number. Just you have to keep up with one number. That'll simplify your diet. It's not that's going to change it overnight, but 30 grams of fiber. If you can hit that number, we don't do this. We don't do this in the United States or Western countries. Like, this is just not part of our diet.
Right.
So it's 30 grams of fiber, but with food.
Yeah.
That's likely to cause a person to lose some weight too, I would imagine.
It's hard. It is hard to do. Yeah.
Well, I'm thinking about what I eat, going, am I getting 30 grams of fiber? I don't know that. And then I went, wow, I'm not tracking that. It's not something I think of. So, and I'm pretty, aware of what I'm putting in my body.
It would have to
most people probably aren't.
Every meal would have to have a substantial amount of fiber in it.
Something,
It would have, you wouldn't be able to just wait till dinner. I mean, that would have to
be like, I'll get the fiber there.
You're going to have to balance it out. And here's the big caution flag here, right? So don't do this overnight. Your gut's gonna rebel. It is going to say, this is weird, this is very different, and you'll get gassy, you'll get bloated, and it's not gonna. It can be punishing. So this is like, you build up to this, but kind of slowly and temper it, without just kind of saying, all right, now all of a sudden I'm gonna have 4 cans of beans for dinner. It's
and a stalk of broccoli.
Just kinda, you will be punished.
Oh man. So what? I guess as our listeners are hearing us kind of talk about this, and they might be getting, this might be a lot of information for them. They might be keeping track with us. If someone wanted to learn a little bit more about your research and just the research in this area, what would you suggest? Where's a good place for them to start? That's good, informational, easy reading.
Well, I don't know that there's easy reading. I'd say for the most part, I mean, Google isn't bad, right? It's like, there's generally good stuff out there, as long as you're an informed consumer of this, in particular, that be careful about grand conclusions, right? That's the big one. I think, just any of your search engines getting you relatively, I mean, it's decent information. It's just, I don't know that it's now that you take it to say, this is causing my problem, and if I take this prebiotic pill something, it's going to solve everything. It's like, if you can, and our knowledge is changing every day. I mean, we really, it's the science is advancing, in part because of the technologies necessary to actually kind of get to what the bacteria look like, it's just becoming much more accessible in terms of the dollars and cents. You know, when I got started in this area, to sequence kind of one sample might have been $1,000, right? Now I can get that exact same sequencing done for 50.
Hmm.
That's in 10 years. So it's still very hard to do this research. So I'd caution over-interpreting mouse studies, animal studies, small healthy controls, or even small samples. It's getting people, it's to do this research, I have to get patients to give me fecal samples, right? And it's our bowel movements, our fecal matter. It's very taboo. We don't talk about these things, you know. Like as a psychologist, I can have talk to a patient and I can get intimate details of past traumas.
Yeah.
And that's okay. That's acceptable to talk to your doctor about trauma, but to talk to a researcher to even offer up a fecal sample, that's very personal and too taboo. It's really hard to do this type of research in a society, not just the United States. I think it's our bowels and fecal matter are we don't talk about these things. And in some regards, I mean, this is adaptive culturally, right? It's to have a dirtiness to it. It's probably protected us from developing a lot of illnesses. But that cultural bias, I'll tell you, makes the research in this area much harder to do.
I have a feeling that you just enlightened a whole lot of our listeners because they had absolutely no idea how this research was done. I did earlier mention the fecal implant, but I don't think they knew what I was talking about. So yes, that is how you measure the bacteria in people's. I mean, there are other ways, there are more direct ways. You can get in there and take some samples out if you needed to, right? But that's the way most people study this, is through fecal matter, right?
Yeah,
And
I mean, your fecal matter, about 60% of it is dead bacteria.
Right.
Right. And that's very cheap, very easy to get to, as opposed to, putting a syringe through your body and grabbing a sample.
Right.
I mean, I joke around about this. It's like all of us are throwing away so much data regularly. It's like it's a lot of data.
Well, it's interesting, just to kind of put it into a more a very recent kind of event, and now they're reporting COVID levels in wastewater, and that's where that's coming from.
Absolutely.
I mean, and so I'm interested to see, or maybe have you seen other studies done of wastewater looking at different kind of biome related has anybody been looking at that? I mean, I see they're doing COVID levels because that kind of gives you an idea of how much COVID there is in the general population. Has anybody tried to look at that from a health perspective of how many people are healthier versus not healthy in certain areas?
We haven't been able to do that because COVID has very much a virus, right? So we're looking for that exact thing. We're not looking for COVID as the phenotype.
So it's just not known what to look for.
Exactly. We don't know what to look for, but I've thought about this, right? Like to get a society's overall health and well-being.
Right. Exactly.
Kind of a well-being metric if we actually knew what to look for. What
byproduct or whatever. Exactly. Yeah, that's good. That's interesting. And so I guess a couple of last questions. One idea or one question I have is, as you talk about this, and Maddie mentioned earlier, I mean, obviously physical health is so intimately related to mental health. I mean, really all just goes together. I don't know why we divide it all up anyway, but and I don't want to overly simplify the whole concept here. Is it, right now we're talking about the gut-brain connection, but, in 10 years, could I have somebody on a podcast and we be talking about the liver-brain connection and another guy, down the road talking about the pancreas-brain connection? And the reality is that ultimately we're just a single system. And if we can control our inflammation and keep our systems running healthy, that it's likely that we're going to have better mental health? Is this just the fact that everything affects everything else, that the gut isn't necessarily more important than some other aspect? Because and I ask this, and I know I'm not doing a good job asking. I ask this because right now, if I go out into the public and I find those people that are always asking me these questions, they'll try to explain to me that somehow the gut is more intimately associated with your mental health life and your brain than, say, your liver is, or your heart is, or whatever. And I'm wondering if it's just all kind of part of one large system that kind of interrelated and functions together. And inflammation, as you mentioned, is a huge contributor to problems. Do you see the gut as uniquely different in its connection to the brain than, say, other organ systems?
I think you've highlighted a big challenge kind of across the board of science, right? And medicine in particular. We're very siloed,
Right.
right? It's what's the most important organ? Well, we've got a specialist for that particular organ system and what it's connected to. And they're going to say, of course, it's all the liver. Of course, it's all the GI tract. Of course, it's all the heart. Of course, it's all the brain. And you're right, it's all interconnected, right? So it's kind of, and it's a system with checks and balances, right? Too much in one area is balanced out with a little less here, where there's rebound. It's just, it's feeding off one another, right? So it's like, I think if we listen to what are, kind of the old wisdom of eat right, exercise, sleep, right? Have meaningful relationships. It's all the things that are kind of good for overall health, I think are good for pancreas health, are good for gut health, are good for bone health. I think they're just good for health. Right now, the gut bacteria and the gut microbiome are, it is relatively unique in that it's combining at least two of the systems. And but then it's bigger than that. So it's, I think as we get better understanding of the various parts of the system, we'll start putting them together, right? And I think what's happening is some of us are working in one area, others are working in another area, and then it's kind of the overwhelm of the data too. So hopefully one day we're able to put all of this all together and we have a better understanding of what's going on. Right. But right now, this is one area that I've been working on. I find it fascinating. It does bring a lot of different facets together, right? So you got these bacteria, you got complicated and confusing psychiatric illnesses, and then you've got systemic effects in terms of inflammation and immune functioning, and then diet and exercise are all related to it. So it's starting to flush it out. Now, I'm sure the heart's implicated in this. Right. I'm sure dental health is implicated in this.
Oh, and that's a hot one right now too. That's Absolutely. Another hot one with the bacteria in your mouth and dental health. The dentists are really pushing that now. This idea that that's related to your body's health as well as your mind. And absolutely.
Well, see, and now there's an emerging literature even that your oral health might put you at risk for dementia because of just the proximity of your mouth to your brain.
Right.
Right. So it's a direct line.
Right. Absolutely. Interesting.
So
well, go ahead.
We should be taking care of our whole bodies, it sounds like.
Yeah, I'd say brush your teeth,
right.
Get a few steps in, eat an apple.
Well, you make a good point, Alok, is that, we really are siloed. I mean, I was a research scientist for most of my career before I came here. And I mean, I have my lab and I do my stuff, and there's a lab next to me and that guy does his stuff, and we may never even speak to each other, even though we're doing related stuff. But in the old days with physicians, you had a guy who did everything for the time. He wrote you some prescriptions and he checked your heart and he delivered a baby and it was really a very, I don't know if you call it a holistic or a more whole body, whole health, whole family approach. And I know we have people out there that still try to do that, but everything is so specific now that, it's I wonder, it's interesting that you give the suggestion that we kind of get back to a simpler idea, that we just like exercise, eat well, maintain relationships. I mean, these are, those are really obvious things we should be doing, but we rather go down and try to get a supplement off a shelf and take it, not knowing really whether it does anything or not, and then go eat, a burger for lunch and never talk to anybody in person, just text them, and we're killing ourselves. I mean, whether we know anything about the gut bacteria or not, we literally are, just the stress and inflammation alone is doing that. But I have to get out of you the quote that you gave me a couple of years ago when I asked you, when I said, everybody wants to know what you need to do. Is there a probiotic that they should get or whatever? And you said, what's the best thing a person can do every day to maintain a healthy gut?
Well, I think from what I told you years ago, Matt, it's probably evolved and even simplified. I think adding an apple to your diet, like just that simple, I think that will make a difference in so many people's lives. And I don't say that just in jest. And I say the apple in particular because it's portable,
right?
Right. You don't need any utensil to actually do it, to consume an apple. It's not going to spoil. It's not going to smush. There are few excuses, like functionally.
Easy to access. I mean, you get it,
they're
all over
not
the place.
horribly expensive.
Right.
There's an apple for everyone. There are probably like 50 varieties at this point.
Right.
So it's you can't say, well, I don't like the apple. Well, you got 49 more to choose from, right? And then here's the thing with an apple. If you're eating an apple, our health behaviors tend to cluster, right? So you eat an apple, maybe you won't, supersize the meal because you had the apple. You're still going wherever, but it puts a little pause in of the supersizing. So it's just that pause really, I think, makes a big difference. And an apple, again, it's got fiber,
right?
It's so. Yeah, that's become kind of my simple one. Let's start with an apple, and it's not cut anything from your diet because cutting tends to be hard. It tends to, we crave what we can't have, right? So let's start by adding to our diets, and the one thing is add a single apple. That's it. That's just your starting point, and it'll start building. Like
so an apple a day keeps the doctor away is the.
It's easy to keep up with too. So there's the old adage that all of us know.
So maybe they weren't all that wrong in the past, maybe. Right? So it is interesting, and I think that I really think that's the problem, is that we think we want simple, so we want a pill. But the reality is that there are simple things we can do, but we just don't think that they're legitimate because they don't seem science-y enough. And so I think that's a good addition. I had a nice apple for lunch today, and hopefully that keeps me a little fuller as the day goes on and I don't snack. I mean, and I know that my dentist also says it's very healthy for me, for my oral health, to eat apples as well. And so, it's you can't go wrong with a nice apple.
Well, let me get a little sciencey with that apple. My preferred apple, the Cosmic Crisp. How sciencey is that?
Yeah, that does sound very sciencey. And if you want a sour one, there's a sour one. I mean, we could have a whole podcast on apple varieties, but you're right. I mean, it's that simple. And then the other thing I think people go out and spend a lot of money on, other than probiotics and prebiotics and all that, are all kinds of different yogurts. I see that all the time. And I think the reality is, and you can tell me if I'm right or wrong here, the majority of the time, these yogurts don't have any live culture in them. They're probably just a bunch of dairy product that's just been over processed and full of sugar, right? I mean, isn't that?
I don't know about the yogurts to really comment on. I mean, I like yogurt, so I eat yogurt.
I like yogurt too. I like a nice Greek yogurt, and like kind of the thicker,
Yeah,
but
exactly.
But again, there's so many varieties of that, and so difficult to figure out what's good and what's bad, and that can be extremely pricey, as you mentioned. Yep. You don't see that with an apple. So we have it from a gut brain expert right here. Apple is the best thing. Go pluck it right off the tree, and off your neighbor's tree. And well, thanks for being with us today, Dr. Madden. We really appreciate it. And hopefully we can have you back in the future when you figure it all out and you can tell us exactly what causes every mental health condition as a result of a bacteria in the gut. And
we'll reach out in a year and see where you're at, because a
Yeah,
year
see
should
where
be
you're
enough
at.
time, right?
Yeah.
Now, I guess just to end real quick, you don't happen to have any particular study going right now that you're gathering, or where do you typically get subjects for your studies?
Right now, it's in one of our outpatient clinics that I'm
And you're
recruiting
using
for.
actual psychiatric patients,
psychiatric
right?
patients. So one of the questions, right? All the research that we have right now, it's really correlation, right?
Right.
You get one fecal sample, you ask a few questionnaires, you get a diagnosis, and how do these two things relate? So one of my big questions is really is our gut, are these bacteria our destiny, or do they change, right? So it's like what we're doing is we're following folks who are receiving treatment here at Houston Methodist and seeing if and how their bacterial kind of structure and function changes as they go through treatment. If they get better, you know, do we have symptomatic improvement? And
Right.
then our bacteria change, or do our bacteria change and then we have symptomatic improvement? Or
Right.
there's some people who don't get better and they have a different bacterial taxon. I don't know. So this is one of the big questions that we're looking to answer. And then another study that I hope to launch probably within the next 6 to 12 months is looking at the gut microbiome in the context of opioid dependence and response to and in treatment. Because opiates affect our gut directly. We know this. They actually slow down kind of the movement of our gut.
Right, absolutely.
They cause constipation. And then one of the biggest challenges is once you discontinue opioid use after a while, it's really bad diarrhea. That's
Absolutely.
horribly debilitating. So it's like to know that, I mean, that's kind of like low-hanging fruit in some regards, right? We know that there's some association. So fascinating. It's some of the early research in this area is on mouse models, right? So we got these mice and got them to press a lever and they got opiates. And they were able to kind of develop opioid dependence in these mice, right? What they did then was you got these mice who are germ-free, who don't have a gut bacteria, don't have any bacteria. That's how they're developed in the lab. You take fecal matter from the opioid dependent mice and you transplant it into the germ-free mice. You can transplant that opioid tolerance.
Oh, wow.
So through the gut, the tolerance, like the dose that should have killed an opioid naive mouse, all of a sudden, because they've got the bacteria, they actually have the same tolerance.
Wow.
Isn't that fascinating?
That is. That really is.
So this is an area that I want to start going down, especially given the opioid crisis that we're all hearing about. Might we be able to, if we had a better understanding of the gut microbiome, to supplement some of our treatments for opioid dependence by manipulating and targeting the gut? So I guess that's the meta message. Like, I don't know that we're going to solve and address directly psychiatric illness or addiction by way of the gut microbiome, but I think it can be one more modality that we can target to help address these complex clinical phenomena.
Right.
So in addition to the meds, the therapies, maybe we can target the gut.
Great. Well, thanks for being with us today. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Appreciate you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to this week's episode of the Madness and Grace podcast. Make sure to subscribe wherever you listen so you'll never miss an episode. While you're at it, if you found value in this conversation, we would love it if you would rate us and leave us a review. Lastly, sharing this podcast with a friend or a family member is a great way to give hope to those who may be struggling with a mental health concern. See you next time as we discuss Madness and Grace.